Spanning nearly 4 billion years from just after the Earth's creation to the present day, the complete Minions and Despicable Me movie timeline is arguably one of the longest in cinematic history. From the arrival of the Minions in prehistory to the events of Despicable Me 4, the main protagonists of the series have shaped many elements of this imagined universe's history. As such, getting a grasp of the key events isn't entirely straightforward. Although the Despicable Me series originally focused on a contemporary, albeit highly stylized alternative time period, the franchise has become increasingly ambitious in its scope. The introduction to Minions, for example, shows how the small yellow creatures have been shaping the course of villainy since the time of the dinosaurs. This means that any comprehensive timeline has a huge range of potentially significant events to choose from. Even though, thanks to the Minions movie, audiences are aware of many significant masters the banana-obsessed henchmen have had over the years. As a result, the complete Minions and Despicable Me movie timeline spans from 3.8 billion BC to the 2010 S. The Minions are created 3.8 billion BC. Technically, the Despicable Me timeline begins with the opening montage of Minions, which means traveling back billions of years. As is made clear in the Minions opening credits, the Minions' origin story begins with the advent of all life on Earth. According to the montage, Minion-like cells have always been drawn towards organisms that are scarier and more nefarious than they are, explaining why the Minions and Despicable Me movie timeline starts so early. However, the early days for the Minions weren't always straightforward. Many of their attempts to help early bosses, including T-Rexes, Egyptian pharaohs, and vampires, often ended with them accidentally killing those they were supposed to be assisting. This unfortunate habit left them listless and alone when the Minions' story proper begins.
Scarlet Overkill!
Scarlet Overkill is born 1927. The next significant event in the Despicable Me timeline doesn't actually occur until the 20th century, with the birth of one of the first Gru-like supervillains the Minions work for, Scarlet Overkill. Although she was born in 1927, it wasn't until the late 60s that she really crossed paths with the Minions and cemented her status as a crucial figure in the timeline. Initially, Minions Kevin, Bob, and Stuart hoped to assist Scarlet as loyal servants. However, they unwittingly managed to foil her plan to steal the British crown jewels, placing themselves at odds with the pioneering supervillain. Were it not for this unfortunate misunderstanding, it's likely that the Minions' history with Gru would be very different. The Minions meet Gru, 1968. The Minions movie ending also marks the start of the henchman's obsession with Despicable Me star Felonious Gru. Gru first meets the Minions in 1968 when he is around 8 years old, assuming his date of birth is still canonically 1960 as revealed in Despicable Me. This spells the start of the Minions' relationship with Gru and leads directly into the events of Minions, The Rise of Gru, as well as the original Despicable Me trilogy. After Scarlet seems to have successfully made off with the Imperial State Crown, she is apprehended by a young Gru, who freezes her with a homemade ray gun before escaping on a rocket-powered bike. This dastardly display wows the Minions, who immediately accept Gru as their new boss.
Good night. Good night.
Yes, good night.
Good night!
No! There are a lot of other villains in the world. But
Gru plots to become a supervillain, 1976. While his successful crown heist at the end of Minions marks the start of Gru's descent into villainy, the journey starts properly in 1976 with the events depicted in Minions, The Rise of Gru. In the second Minions movie, Gru works with his army of Minions to join the supervillain group known as the Vicious Six. After a disappointing interview, Gru elects to prove his credentials by stealing the coveted Zodiac Stone. This, in turn, leads him to team up with ex-vicious six-member Wild Knuckles, who teaches him all he knows about villainy and even helps him make off with the Mona Lisa. In many ways, this is a formative period that defines much of Gru's character until the start of Despicable Me. It also marks the start of his on-again, off-again collaborative partnership with Dr. Nefario.
Okay, here we are. Home sweet home.
Gru adopts Margot, Edith, and Agnes, 2012.
This is like your house.
After pursuing a path of villainy for decades, Gru's decision to adopt Margot, Edith, and Agnes proves to be one of the most consequential for his character development. His rivalry with the villain Vector forces him to think outside the box, initially planning to use the girls as a means to gain entry to his rival's lair. However, it's only after he realizes his love for the trio that he is both able to overcome his nemesis and find the inner peace that had eluded him prior to the events of Despicable Me. Were it not for his decision to adopt the kids, it's likely that Gru would have continued down a villainous path and remained unhappy as a result. As it is, he managed to successfully strand Vector on the moon and find a new lease of life with his family.
As you can see,
Lucy Wilde Recruits, Gru, 2013. The next significant event in the Despicable Me timeline is when Lucy recruits Gru in 2013, which happens in Despicable Me 2. Second only to Margot, Edith, and Agnes in terms of importance is Gru's relationship with anti-villain league agent Lucy Wilde. Although initially sent to recruit the former supervillain, Lucy and Gru quickly form a bond that goes far beyond anything Gru has experienced before.
Agent Lucy Wilde of
Although the
AVL.
relationship is initially, according to Gru at least, strictly professional,
Sorry.
things quickly spiral out of control,
Oh, sorry,
resulting in their eventual marriage at the end of Despicable Me 2. In fact, it is the girls who help
You really should
identify
announce
how
your weapons
significant
after
Lucy
you fire
actually
them,
is,
Mr.
making it clear to Gru
example.
that they both crave a maternal figure and believe that the pair will fall in love.
Oh, it works so
Gru
good.
and Lucy
close to bringing it.
leave the AVL 2017. Though there's only a year between Despicable Me and Despicable Me 2, the timeline jumps a few years between the second and third movie, with Gru and Lucy working with the AVL for 4 years before leaving in 2017. Gru and Lucy's expulsion from the AVL at the beginning of Despicable Me 3 is the catalyst for one of the only periods of doubt in Gru's more positive character arc.
Well, I guess she did.
After leaving the group and struggling to find a new line of work, the former villain is increasingly tempted to return to his old ways, not least by his brother Drew, who reveals that their father was actually a successful villain in his own right.
Not just a villain.
The Despicable Me 3 arc is significant, not just for the inner turmoil it involves, but also for the fact that by the end of the movie, many of the minions have left Gru to be with his more untoward
so
brother.
proud of you and what a great villain you were. You what?
Where Despicable Me 4 fits in around 2018. While Despicable Me 4 has yet to release in theaters, the trailer does provide a few details that make placing it in the wider Despicable Me timeline possible to a degree. A key plot thread in Despicable Me 4 is the arrival of Gru Jr., the baby son of Gru and Lucy. This means that Despicable Me 4 likely takes place around a year after the previous installment, falling at around 2018 on the timeline. However, there are several reasons the Despicable Me and Minions timeline is incredibly loose and difficult to follow at points. And Despicable Me 4 seems to only make matters even more confusing. For example, while Lucy and Gru now have a baby, Agnes, Edith, and Margot don't seem to have aged. Since 2010's Despicable Me is set in 2012, the three girls should have changed significantly in appearance by 2018. Yet they look exactly the same as their first appearance. Let us know in the comments if you watched till here, and don't forget to follow for more content like this.